This podcast is brought to you by Gridiron Heroics Media.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome one and all to the Gridiron Heroics Football Show. I'm Max Dean. You can find me on Twitter at @TheMaxDean. And we're here to pick another Sunday slate of NFL games against the spread. To help me do that, of course, I have Bryson Owens. And we also have Noah Ashley, who is our producer, and he's stepping in place of Kyle Nishida to pick some games. Bryson, how are you today?
I'm doing well, man. Just like normal Bronco fans, more excited for the Nuggets game tonight than the Broncos game. So it's gonna be a fun Sunday. Gonna watch some better games than whatever we're gonna put out there.
Yeah, it is what it is. This has been my life for the majority of football for the past however many years. By this time, we're looking more at draft order than wins. We're actually, secretly hoping for losses. But for the Broncos, I guess it doesn't even matter because
it doesn't help us at all.
They need the 49ers to lose. So,
yeah.
Noah, how are you today, man?
Doing well. Happy that I get to watch the day of football before the Colts come on tonight. Similar sentiments as Broncos fans.
Yeah, well, anytime your team is on prime time, that means there's no stress during the day. You can watch all the games. I always have a better eye on what's going on when the Jets aren't playing in the afternoon, no doubt about it. So, we're going to pick all the games today. It's going to be a simpler show. It's just going to be the picks, and we're going to pick all the way through Sunday Night Football, and that's going to be it. And then I'm going to go do a little bit of housework in time to watch some football. All right, so as usual, what we're going to do real quick is take a look at the current playoff picture. So if the season ended today, not too much has changed since last week. The Patriots did lose, so that drops them down to 6-6 and puts them 2 spots back from potential playoff berth. And the Bills won, which bumps them temporarily over the Dolphins. Now, if the Dolphins win today, they will automatically go back into the 2nd seed because they have the tiebreaker over the Bills. However, if they lose, they will stay down in the wild card, and the Chiefs have the opportunity to fall out of the number 1 seed as well, because if they lose to the Bengals, then the Bills will take over the number 1 seed due to their tiebreaker. The Jets have the opportunity to get ahead of Miami, because if Miami loses to the 49ers today, the Jets will, and if the Jets also win over the Vikings, that will bump them up in the standings as well. I don't think anything else changes there. Either the Bengals or the Ravens have the opportunity to get a game up on the other in the AFC North race. But the Bengals have to play the Chiefs, so that's a tough out. And then Ravens have, I believe, a much easier game to today. They are playing the Broncos. So you never know. But it's looking like the Ravens will maintain the lead on the division at least for one more week. On the NFC side of things, the Eagles maintain their lead over the conference as well. The Vikings at 9-2 are a couple of spots ahead of pretty much anyone else. Also, they do have to play the Jets today, which is a very good defense. So possibly that is a game that they could fall back one on. The 49ers have to play the Dolphins. So even though they're a game up on the Seahawks, that's a very difficult matchup as well. And it could give the Seahawks an opportunity to jump back ahead. Although I guess technically they have the tiebreaker. So at worst, the 49ers would be tied with the tiebreaker for that division. The Buccaneers still have a lead with a losing record, and the Cowboys, Giants, and Commanders are all still in playoff position as of right now. So we will see if the NFC East starts to get broken up a little bit and fall out. We have the projected matchups at the end. As of right now, that could all change. But the last thing that we'll take a look at before we jump into the actual picks themselves are the current draft order. And this is just for non-playoff teams since that moves around so much. As it stands, the Texans are the first overall pick at 1-9-1. The Bears lost last week, bumped them into the number 2 pick at 3-9. So the Bears would be in prime position to draft the first non-quarterback if they so chose, but they also have the opportunity to trade back as of right now. The Seahawks have the Broncos pick, so that puts them at 3rd overall. So they probably wouldn't choose a quarterback, at this point, but there's always an opportunity for the wheels to fall off. The Geno Smith coaster, the Geno coaster, as we used to call it back when he was a Jet. The Lions have the Rams pick, so they could either draft another defensive player or take their future quarterback there. And we've got Panthers, who are quarterback needy, the Eagles, who are lounging at 6 with the Saints pick, and then a few more teams who we don't really know what they would be looking for at this point: Cardinals, Packers, and Raiders. And then finally the Texans back in the top 10 again with the Browns pick. So they get the 1st overall pick and the 10th overall pick, not unsimilar to what they had last year, I believe at 3rd overall, or 2nd overall, excuse me. No, 3rd. Yeah, 3rd overall and 13th, I think. So another pair of high picks for them, although we shall see how that Browns pick ends up, as we know that Deshaun Watson is returning today. So that's the top 10. Everybody else will get shuffled around a fair amount. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that team makes up the top 10 in some way, shape, or form. So, gentlemen, are we ready to jump into some picks today?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's do it. All right, so our first game of the day is going to be the Denver Broncos hosting the Baltimore Ravens. Broncos are plus 9.5, so distinct underdogs. The Ravens have not been putting teams away that they should lately. So I feel like this is a sneaky matchup. It's been a pretty negative couple of weeks for the Broncos. The energy is not good there. It's not a positive place, no matter how positive Russell Wilson tries to be. After his teammate yelling at him on the sideline, it's kind of hit a new low, and they have the opportunity to try and turn things around and create a little bit more positive energy going into the offseason, but that will be tough going up against Lamar Jackson. Bryson, I'm going to throw it to you, man. Do you think the Broncos can cover this spread? Do you think they can shock and upset, or do you think the Ravens roll away with this one?
So, first of all, I'm so happy this is one of the first games of the day. Usually the Broncos are in that 2 o'clock window with the Mountain West time zone, and I have to watch all the other morning games, and I have to suffer through the one. There's only 3 games, and in Denver we only get the one Bronco game, so I have to suffer through that one. This one, I can just have this one on in the background and coast through the day, just knowing my Broncos are going to lose this game, because I think they are going to lose this game. It's pretty obvious that's going to happen. That's just... I don't think we're in a position to win very many more football games. I think there's only 1 or 2 I can see us winning, and those are against other teams that aren't doing well this year. I do think we have a chance to cover, though. 9.5 points is a lot of points, especially for a team against Baltimore, like you said, Max, haven't been very good at putting teams away like they should. They're in a lot of one-possession games, just like the Broncos are. I think even with all the injuries, this defense is still good enough to keep the game close for going into the fourth quarter. And as we've seen, the Ravens have a tendency to blow leads coming into the fourth quarter. So maybe that gives the Broncos an opportunity to keep this game close. And I think people think it will. I know that both teams are dealing with a lot of injuries. Specifically, the Broncos seem to have an injured key player at every position right now. So people are looking at this matchup like, how in the world can the Broncos stay within 2 scores of this team? I think this defense is good enough to keep it close. I just don't think the offense is good enough to win the football game. So I think the Broncos are 9.5 points is too much for me with how good this defense still is.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of fair points there. Yeah, we've seen the Ravens blow a lot of late leads to teams that they definitely should not do that to. But the Broncos are the Broncos still, and I'm worried about them scoring enough points to keep up with this 9.5 point spread. So just simply, I'll just take the Ravens covering the spread because I think maybe they'll figure it out and get it done today.
Yeah, they might bounce back. Last week, I rode the heavy favorites, and they came through for me. I had like 4 or 5, I think 5 different favorites of like
Mhm.
6 or 7 plus, and I took them all, and they all came through for me. So um, I don't think I'm going to do that in this case. I'm going to take the Broncos. I know that things are negative there, but the NFL is the NFL, and the Broncos defense is the Broncos defense. And I definitely think the Ravens are going to win. I'm going to take the Broncos to cover, though. I do believe that it will be something like even an 8 or a 9 point victory,
Mhm.
but it will be just enough that that half point will come into play. So I'm going to take Broncos. And next up, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars visiting the Detroit Lions. Okay, Jaguars are half point underdogs at the Lions. So basically, Vegas is telling us that the Jaguars are ever so slightly better. Oops,
Mhm.
let's get that back up there. The Jaguars are ever so slightly better, but this is a relatively close matchup. The Lions will have home field advantage. I think they're definitely looking at last week's performance of the Jaguars fairly heavily because the Lions have been an overall hotter team over the past few weeks. But if you just look at last week, Trevor Lawrence definitely had a big time performance, especially to close out the game. So I think this is, sneaky one of the more fun games. Now, it doesn't probably mean much for the playoffs this year, but both of these teams are on the rise, and we would hope that both of them are more competitive next year. So even though we don't know if the Lions have their quarterback of the future, this could be a preview of a couple of potential wild card teams going into 2023. So Bryson, who do you think is going to come out on top? Because this is essentially just a pick 'em at this point.
Yeah, I really like this game a lot. This is going to be one of my favorite games to watch this week. These are two of my favorite teams to keep an eye on this season just because I liked what both of them did in the offseason. And I think Detroit's going to come out and win this game. This is one of those games this week also that had a really crazy line movement. The Lions open up as 1.5 point underdogs, and now all of a sudden they're essentially, favorites at minus half a point. So if basically a pick 'em, but they went from 1.5 point underdogs to a pick 'em game, which is pretty crazy to look at for only a few days. But I think the Lions are just riding with so much, even though they're not winning games like the Jaguars won last week, the Lions just seem like they have the momentum going offensively in every game. Jamal Williams is playing out of his mind. It seems like he's going to score a touchdown every week. Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the most underrated receivers in the league, in my opinion. I think just because he plays in Detroit, not a ton of people are paying attention to him, but he is the best receiver in this game, in my opinion. I don't know if everyone feels that way, but I think Amon-Ra St. Brown's the best receiver in this game. And I think there's not going to be a lot of defense play. I think this is going to be a high scoring game. I just think the Lions have put it together offensively more times this season than the Jaguars have. So I trust the Lions offense to be a little bit more consistent going into this game. I'm also really excited to watch Jameson Williams play. I think he and Amon-Ra are going to be an interesting wide receiver duo. I don't know how much, he's going to get, how much playing time he's going to get. I don't know how many plays they have drawn up for him specifically, but I think it's going to be interesting to watch him play. So I think the Lions being at home are just ever so slightly a little bit better, in my opinion.
Yep. A big thing for me in this game, the Jaguars wide receiver Zay Jones is questionable, and being a AFC South guy, you see that Trevor Lawrence relies heavily on Zay Jones a lot of the time, especially to make big plays.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Travis Etienne is questionable as well, and he's been very, very big for their offense. So with those two injuries and just the Lions playing at home, I'll take the Lions with this pretty much pick 'em.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about the Lions right now. It's a shame that they lost so many games to start the season because they would be right there in the playoff race. They're only a couple of games back right now, but it's tough. you got to basically catch up 3 games in the 6 games remaining in the season. So it's probably just out of reach. But the NFC East does have to play each other quite a bit. So there's an opportunity for the Lions to sneak in potentially over a team like the Commanders, who currently, like I said, have just a slightly better record. I'm going to take the Lions in this game. I do like them. This is a tough one just because I think the line is it reflects how close these teams are right now. But I think we're gonna have a big game from second overall pick. I think Jameson Williams. I don't know how much of a factor he'll be. He definitely will change the game planning, and I don't think the Jaguars' defense is spectacular at this point. So maybe we will see a bomb to Jameson Williams. All right. The Houston Texans, oh my lord. The Houston Texans are hosting the Cleveland Browns in the return of Deshaun Watson. It's all we've been hearing about all week. This is probably all we'll hear about for the next week. The Texans are +8 at home. Probably largely due to what? Actually, you know what? Honestly, this spread, I'm not even sure how different it would be even if it was Jacoby Brissett, because they still play fairly well on offense and the Texans just can't do anything. So the question is, do we think the Browns cover? Because I think the Texans have basically proven and stamped in cement at this point that they are probably not going to win any more games this season. So it's really just how much do they lose by? Do they have a little fire because of Deshaun Watson leaving? Do most of these guys just frankly not care about that at this point? And does Deshaun Watson play well? Is he rusty? Does it matter because their run game is so good? I mean, there are some questions here, but pretty much all of them have at least a partial answer of the Browns winning, I think. So what do you think, Bryson?
I have the Texans covering here. I do have the Browns winning this game, but I do think the Texans cover this 8-point spread in large part because I think it's going to be a pretty heavy dose of the run game for both teams in this one. Neither team very good at stopping the run, and both teams have very, very good running backs. So I think they're going to rely on those to get this offense going, especially like you said, Deshaun Watson. My guess is he's going to be extremely rusty. Hasn't played football in a year and a half, almost 2 years. So I think he's going to be extraordinarily rusty. They're going to rely pretty heavily on Chubb to carry them through this game because it is just the Texans. Chubb should be able to carry them through this game. So I think there'll just be less possessions for both teams, less chances for the Browns to jump out to a massive lead because of that. And I do think the Texans are going to play with a little bit more fire under their belt, like you mentioned, because Deshaun Watson coming back to Houston. It's going to be a hostile crowd. This may be the most people in this game just so Texans fans can boo Deshaun Watson in this game. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how Deshaun Watson handles that. But more than anything, I'm taking the Texans to cover here because I just think Deshaun's going to be so off to start this game. Like I said, he hasn't played football in a year and a half to almost 2 years. I don't care how good you are. You don't play football for that long, especially at the quarterback position where there's so much reading and reacting and recognizing coverages and seeing when someone's blitzing off the edge and when someone's not blitzing and all that kind of stuff that Deshaun hasn't had to deal with. I think he's going to misread some things. I think he's going to miss some timing throws, especially with Amari Cooper being a timing route running type receiver. So I think the offense is going to look a little bit sluggish out of the gate for the Browns. I think the Texans are in a good spot to cover this spread.
I like what you're saying for sure. I can see Deshaun coming off being pretty rusty, and he has been getting a lot of snaps with the first team, so maybe not as much as it is with his teammates, but yeah, like you said, responding to what the defenses show to him. So going with that, I think I'll also take the Texans to cover. Just I'll put my faith in Deshaun Watson being a little rusty as well.
I'm going to take the Browns to cover here because I think your point is accurate, because I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's rusty. In fact, I expect it to some degree. I just think that the matchup is too much in his favor. And even if he looks sloppy, like I said, they would probably cover this with Jacoby Brissett they will probably cover it just due to the explosive nature of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt alone. I mean, I might be more hesitant, but Brandon Cooks is out for this game and Derek Stingley Jr. is out for this game. So, probably the two best players they have outside of, maybe Tunsil and Howard, they're not playing. And so basically this game it's just too lopsided. So I think that basically Deshaun Watson can be afforded a very sloppy game in this one and still cover pretty comfortably. I think, it's the kind of thing where, people will be talking about how it's like an ugly lead, like it's like a 5-3 lead in like going into halftime, and we see that on all of the halftime. I'm calling this, right? So if this happens, shouting it out. But it's an ugly game. Like the Browns have a safety and a field goal, and the Texans have a field goal. So it's a 5-3 lead in halftime. And then by the end of the fourth quarter, they've scored a couple of times. Like Nick Chubb has 2 touchdowns. Deshaun has at least 1 lob up to David Njoku, something like that. So, at some point the spread or the point spread will eventually be over 8. So I'm going to take the Browns to pick or to win and cover, even though I do agree with you that we will see some of that rust in this game. All right, next up, we have the Tennessee Titans visiting the Philadelphia Eagles. So Tennessee lost last week against the Bengals in a potential future playoff matchup, and they still maintain the lead in their division by quite a bit. They have to play the Eagles in Philly, which is a very difficult matchup. They're underdogs by 4.5 points. And if they lose this game, they will more than likely still have a comfortable lead on their division, but they will probably drop into the 4th seed. So just a slight difference. But the Eagles, again, are pretty comfortably leading the NFC right now, but the Cowboys have looked pretty good, so they need to stay, they need to mind their P's and Q's, because it would only take 1 or 2 games for the Cowboys to turn around, get right up against them, and then they have that one game that could potentially decide how the NFC East goes. So I'm comfortable that the Eagles will probably win this game, but knowing the Titans defense, it could be a very, very tight matchup. So that 4.5 point spread is not obvious. What do you think, Bryson?
Yeah, like you said, I'm in complete agreement. I do think the Eagles win this game, but I think the Titans have a really good shot at covering the spread. I know it's not a massive spread or anything, but these are 2 good football teams. I think it's going to be a very close game the entire time. And the Titans play the brand of football that's given the Eagles the most trouble so far this year. It's been a run-heavy offense with a defense that can stop the run. The Titans have Derrick Henry, who is maybe not the best back in football this year, but he is certainly up there with the most impactful running backs in the NFL. And they have the 3rd-ranked rush defense in the NFL, so they have a good chance of stopping what the Eagles do well. And I think one thing that's been interesting, I don't think he's the most impactful or the best player on that offense, but since Dallas Goedert's been out, Jalen Hurts, a little bit rocky every now and then. I think he's missing his big body weapon over the middle of the field that just is a matchup nightmare for most defenses, as most quarterbacks would be if their star tight end is out. I think he's slowly trying to figure out which wide receivers to trust more. I mean, obviously he trusts A.J. Brown the most, but I think he's trying to figure out which out of Smith and Watkins to trust after that for the big plays when A.J. Brown is doubled. And I think this is going to be another game where he's trying to experiment that a little bit, trying to find another matchup that works in his favor. And the Titans, despite all their injuries, have continued to play good football. They continue to win football games. And Ryan Tannehill is now gaining a connection with Robert Woods, which is big. That's a big connection for this offense to have. And Treylon Burks seems to be getting more and more comfortable. So I think the Titans have enough offensively to keep up with the Eagles. And I think that the run defense for them is going to keep them in this game. I do think the Eagles are going to pull it out in the end. They might have a game-winning field goal drive at the end of the game to escape 11-1, but I think the Titans keep it close.
Yep. I think the Eagles and the Titans will probably have a pretty close game as well, considering the Titans are just that team that fight and fight and fight and just keep that game close. I'm a little worried about Jeffrey Simmons. He's been listed as questionable. I don't know if exactly, but I write the injury reports for us, and I think he's been questionable for the past 4 or 5 weeks. But he's been playing, if I'm not mistaken. He's just like the team, tough as nails. But if him and Nico Autry both miss today's game, I have a little bit more faith in the Eagles being able to pull away more than this 4.5 point spread. So I will lean with the Eagles covering the spread this week.
Yeah, I'm going to go with them too, just because that even if Jeffrey Simmons does play, he's playing banged up and he can still be impactful. But that will probably be mitigated to some degree by how good the Eagles' offensive line is. I believe they have all their starters in this week. They've been pretty healthy on the O-line. So that means, he's going to be getting a healthy pairing of Landon Dickerson, of Isaac Sumalu, of Jason Kelsey, you know what I mean? And he's going to have to deal with the occasional pull from, Jordan Mailata's massive human being, Lane Johnson, excellent athlete. So he's just going to, that's a really, really tough matchup. And I believe I'm not seeing Jordan Davis on the injury report, which means this may be his first game back since he got hurt. And we're going to see what it looks like when, oh geez. I have a brain lock right now. The Titans running back, Derrick Henry, goes up against a brick wall like Jordan Davis. So we'll see how impactful he can be in the run game for them. So I'm going to take the Eagles to cover here as well, but I don't think it will be a huge victory. I think, it's going to be one of those where we're basically right till the end. The Titans have the opportunity to drive and win with a touchdown, but not a field goal. And then they won't be able to quite get it done. Or maybe it'll be slightly bigger, but I think I'm comfortable with the Eagles in this game. Man, you're tired when you can't think of Derrick Henry. All right. In a game near and dear to my heart, we have the New York Jets going into play against the Minnesota Vikings. The Jets are 3-point underdogs. And so basically that means that Vegas is saying these teams are relatively equal. I think it's an interesting matchup because the Vikings defense has been questionable against the pass. Even though they have very good pass rushers, offenses have been able to get the ball out quickly, and their coverage has not been spectacular. That's something that Mike White's very good at, getting the ball out quickly to where it needs to go and letting his receivers do the work. The Vikings offense has been very explosive, but the Jets have one of the best corners in football. Now, I don't know if he'll travel with him, but they have a very good secondary regardless. And a key matchup in this is Quinnen Williams probably shredding the interior of the Vikings offensive line because their tackle play has been good. And even though they're without Christian Darrisaw, it's been good overall. But I think the real mismatch is Quinnen and possibly Sheldon Rankins, who looks like he's returning in this game. So I think that they will be able to, definitely move the ball. The question will be, how do the Jets hold up in the red zone? And can Mike White carry on his performance after last week? So I think there are, you just look at the obvious one. Justin Jefferson has to be stopped, which he almost hasn't at all. The Jets might have one of the better opportunities to do that in the entire league right now. But they have to do it, and Mike White has to play well, and they have to stop Dalvin Cook as well. So those are the key points of the game. Bryson, how do you think this plays out?
This was one of the tougher games for me to pick because both teams are playing really, really well. The Jets defense is elite. It's one of the best defenses in football. Like you mentioned, probably the best cornerback duo in the NFL, along with a great pass rush, and then really good linebacker play as well. And then the Vikings offense, it's been a lot of Justin Jefferson. It's been pretty much him or bust a lot of games. Kirk Cousins just kind of looks at Justin Jefferson first, second, or third, which, hey, when you have one of the best receivers in football, not the worst option.
Right.
And then you've got Dalvin Cook, who kind of got off to a slow start, been better this second half of the season so far. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I am worried about that Vikings defense. Like you mentioned, it's not really performing great. They do have Zadarius Smith, who's been phenomenal for them, but that's been about it for that defense. It's been kind of a little bit lackluster so far this year. I am going to take the Vikings to cover here, though, mostly because for whatever reason, the Vikings have just found a way to get it done week in and week out in matchups that they probably shouldn't have won. They found a way to come out with a victory. This is a matchup that actually kind of favors the Jets because of that cornerback play. And it Adam Thielen's been okay this year. He's been nothing special. TJ Hawkinson is a really good tight end, but he's been kind of worked into this offense a little slowly. So I don't know how much of a factor he's going to play in this game. But I think just the Vikings for this season have something going on where they're just going to find a way to win games, whether it's a really key stop in the fourth quarter or something weird happening like what happened in that Bills game, or Kirk Cousins finding a way to go on a game-winning drive. And I think a similar thing happens in this game. I think you're going to look at this and be like, well, the Jets outplayed the Vikings, but the Vikings came away with a win. I think that's going to be how I view this game happening.
Yeah, I think you talked me in to taking the Jets with all your points. I think the game will probably end with either the Jets trying to kick a game-winning field goal or Kirk Cousins trying to drive the field and win. But I believe that means that the game will be within the 3 points. And I'll put my faith in the Jets cornerbacks and their defense to get them this +3 cover.
So I'm going to take the Jets as well, in part just due to the fact that it is such a close game and the Jets are giving me points. The Jets have also been very good against the spread so far this year. They've been underdogs a lot and they've outright won a lot. And then they won last week, as a heavy favorite or relatively heavy favorite. But if the Jets lose this game, I do believe that the exact pathway to it happening is a very good performance by the defense, except on third down. TJ Hawkinson gets the ball and just extends drives. I believe that if the Jets do fall in this game, it is going to be because on third downs, he makes a few plays to just extend drives and just, keep them in it. I think that the Jets defense will have a good day against Justin Jefferson, whether they just bracket the heck out of him and put sauce on Thielen and just absolutely lock him down for the majority of the game, or if we see some direct sauce JJ matchups. Either way, it's going to be fun to see how that shakes out. So I'm going to pick the Jets. But like I said, if there is a pathway to victory, I think it's TJ Hawkinson. Maybe not having a monster game, but just having situationally just killer receptions that extend the drives for the Vikings. So, all right. The Falcons in a straight pick'em host the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this is interesting. I think the Steelers have some more positive energy right now than the Falcons. I'm surprised. I guess it's just because the Falcons are home, really, because they're basically saying the Steelers are slightly better. So I guess I agree with that. But, home is home. So what do we think, Bryson? Do the Pittsburgh Steelers and their defense that has gotten healthier throttle the Atlanta Falcons, or do the Falcons somehow work something in that gives the rookie quarterback a little bit of trouble?
I don't know if the Steelers throttle the Falcons, but I do think the Steelers win. That defense is suffocating. That Atlanta offense has not been performing like it did early in the year, especially with Mariota. He's been really, really struggling as of late. Kenny Pickett playing a little bit better. He seems to finally get a hold of this offense. He's playing a little bit more confidently. He didn't turn the ball over, which is huge considering how he got started with that 3 interception game against Miami, 3 interception game against New York. I mean, he's had big turnover days. Last 3 weeks hasn't turned the ball over. So I think he's reading the defenses a little bit better. I think he's starting to play with a little bit more confidence. Najee Harris is running the football a little bit better as of late, which is helping. But it's largely because of that defense that I'm taking the Steelers in this game. I don't know if the Falcons are going to get much going offensively in this game. That defense is suffocating. TJ Watt's a monster. He wrecks games all by himself. And I know that this Falcons team is very well coached, in my opinion. I like Arthur Smith. I think he has this team playing higher than I think most people thought they'd be so far this year. but against this Steelers defense, against Mike Tomlin, I just don't know if it's going to get done. And then I think a legit question as soon as the Falcons go to 5-8 is Desmond Ridder going to get in the game? We mentioned it last week. We wanted to see him play. He hasn't gotten playing time. If the Falcons go to 5-8 are pretty much out of this playoff race, they should be looking at that rookie quarterback.
Yep, for sure. I think I agree with the Desmond Ridder thing, but yeah, I'd like to think that the Steelers are a good team since they were able to put it to the Colts last week. TJ Watt is listed as questionable, but I think he was questionable as well last week.
Mm-hmm.
So if he plays, he's dangerous, like you said. He can completely wreck the game by himself. I haven't watched a whole lot of Atlanta football this year, but so I'll go with the Steelers getting the win here, just to make the Colts look a little bit less worse, I guess.
Yeah. The Falcons aren't really on what you'd call a hot streak right now. They lose Kyle Pitts, so essentially they have two offensive weapons at this point. One is Drake London, the other is Cordarrelle Patterson, and that's pretty much it. So, against the Steelers defense that features Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith, and most likely TJ Watt, who will probably be listed on the injury report for the rest of the season after coming back from his injury. I mean, that it doesn't really bode well for Cordarrelle Patterson. I don't think he's going to be steamrolling guys at the defensive line position in this game, at least. And then they have Minkah Fitzpatrick, you know what I mean, who will be easily able to help bracket Drake London if they have any concern about what he can do to them. And he is a good player, so I wouldn't be surprised if, he gets his at least a little bit. Mm-hmm. But this is also maybe not the game that I would want to insert Desmond Ridder into. So maybe we cut them some slack for not inserting him here. But again, if they do lose this game, it's probably time to start seeing what he can do. So in a straight pick 'em, it's an easy choice. I'm going to take the Steelers in this game. They're playing better football right now. I'm going to trust Mike Tomlin. I wouldn't be surprised if he somehow gets them back to that 8-8 or I guess 9-8, record, or at least close to it, and kind of maintains his legacy there. But that'll do it for that game. The Giants and the Commanders, this is the NFC East matchup that we were talking about, where one of these teams can help push the other out of the playoffs. And the Commanders are -2 favorites in New York. The Giants have kind of fallen back to earth a little bit. I think we all expected this. Mm-hmm. Now, they may still make the playoffs, but it's going to, I don't want to say it's going to be them limping in, but it's definitely going to be them slowing down from the dead sprint that they were on to start the season. So the Commanders are also not quite a complete team. They've got a decent offensive line. They've got some very good weapons. They've got a pass rush and a secondary that's kind of coming together. So, you look at the Giants, and they had a good offensive line. They've had some injuries there, so Evan Neal is out. I think a big part of their offensive line being good was definitely bolstered by the explosive play of Saquon Barkley, because they haven't been the best in pass protection outside of Andrew Thomas. You look at their weapons, and it's like that. It's horrendous. I mean, they just have nobody. They have nobody to catch passes, so it's just it falls completely on Saquon Barkley. Defensively, not bad. Probably not the most talented, but they've been good. But Adoree Jackson is out, which is pretty unfortunate for them because he's probably their best secondary player. So it's really going to be on Kayvon Thibodeau, Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, some of these guys up front to probably win the game. And then, of course, some timely blitzing from Wink Martindale. So I think the spread is probably pretty fair. It is in New York, and the Giants fans are having fun with this season, so there might be some noise there. It might be pretty loud, but that's the preview for this game, Bryson. So what do you think is going to come to fruition?
Yeah, this was a fascinating game for me to look at because I was on the Giants for most this week, and then for some reason going to bed last night, I was like, you know what? I think the Commanders are going to win this football game. I think the Commanders are going to cover the spread. I think they're playing with a ton of momentum right now. They're playing hotter than a lot of teams are in this league right now. For whatever reason, Taylor Heineke wins them football games. They love this guy. They love playing with him. Terry McLaurin, I've mentioned it before. They have a connection that Terry McLaurin hasn't had with a lot of his quarterbacks. He and Heineke are on the same page a lot of times. Brian Robinson is playing very, very well right now. That defense, like you mentioned, it is 8th in the NFL against the rush. And that's going to be the Giants with all those receivers hurt that you mentioned. I mean, who does Daniel Jones have to throw the football to? It's going to be Saquon or bust for this Giants offense. And against this Washington defense, I don't know if he's going to be able to get it done this week. Saquon's also kind of cooled off. He's interesting. You've noticed a trend with the Giants. As soon as Saquon started to cool off, this team started losing more football games. I think that's a trend that's going to continue this week. I think the Commanders, with all that momentum they're riding, are going to take this game in New York and win. I don't think it's going to be an easy win. I think it's going to be a close game because I think these teams are relatively evenly matched. But I do think the Commanders come away with at least a 2-point win.
Yep, this is definitely one of the more interesting games we have this week. Yeah, it's tough. I think I'll take the Commanders as well to cover. They have been playing well, and I think I'll just take the Commanders on the upswing and the Giants on the downswing for this one.
So it's funny that you're talking about Saquon Barkley. I remember at some point this season, Kyron said Saquon for MVP, and I think he was, half serious, like he knows it was never going to happen, but he was making a point that this is the most valuable player on any team's offense, which was probably true for their streak of winning. It's tough to completely rely on a running back to get you all the way there. But considering the fact that even in the seasons where, Derrick Henry was having phenomenal years, Ryan Tannehill was still playing pretty well. They still had A.J. Brown, who was putting up 1,000-yard seasons and having really big games. They also had a very good defense for a lot of those seasons. In this season that Saquon Barkley got them to, I think, 7-2 at one point, they were pretty void of anything except for a decent offensive line and him. I mean, defensively, they had a few good players, but nobody was locking anybody down. Adoree Jackson was playing pretty well. I think Xavier McKinney has become a pretty good safety for them. They have some guys on the defensive line, Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams, like I mentioned, but none of those guys are playing like, well, actually, Dexter Lawrence having a pretty good year, but most of these guys are not playing, at an all-pro level, and they're certainly not winning you games. They're just contributing, and it is all on Saquon. So if there was a case to be made, if this production level had kept rolling, I think that you could certainly make that argument. But as he has cooled off, so have the Giants, and so I'm going to take the Commanders in this game as well. I think that Wink Martindale is going to be able to confuse Taylor Heineke a fair amount. So this might be a little bit of a down performance, kind of similar to last week, where he's slinging the ball around, making some mistakes, maybe some turnovers, but ultimately the Commanders will just be a better team. And since the spread is so close, it's only -2. I think if they win, they probably cover it. So I think it could be a little bit of a sloppy game offensively for the Commanders, but ultimately they will win it and be able to cover that spread in that fashion. So next up, we have an NFC North matchup. The Chicago Bears are hosting Aaron Rodgers. According to Aaron Rodgers, he owns the Bears. So this is an opportunity for the Bears to, in their own home, finally beat Aaron Rodgers, who has not played super well for the majority of the season. So last week, I believe it was last week on the days are running together now. It's been a busy week, but he played Sunday Night Football against the Eagles, I do believe.
Yep.
And he went out in this game with an injury, a rib injury, I believe. So We saw Jordan Love. Rodgers is supposed to play in this game, but if he's banged up, do they pull him at some point? The offense is looking a little bit better. Bears are certainly not the Eagles. It's not the biggest spread. It's only 4.5. I mean, how do we feel about this? Do we think that this is Vegas overly reading into 1 week or a couple weeks? Because I still think that the Packers could go off in this game. Regardless of how good they are in the course of the season, Bears are in a really tough spot with injuries. I mean, they got beat up by the Jets pretty badly. I think the Jets are better than the Packers, but I think they're still better than the Bears too.
I think this is going to be, the Packers have been a hard team to read this year. We all took the Dallas Cowboys to beat them, and sure enough, the Packers had a classic Aaron Rodgers game where he beats the Cowboys, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, is this team turning it around?" But then they have games like against Detroit where they look terrible and they lose without scoring like any points. So the Packers have been a tough team to read this year. I do have a lot of confidence with the Packers just in the fact that it's Aaron Rodgers against the Bears, and like he said, he does own the Bears. If there's one team Aaron knows how to beat pretty consistently, it is Chicago. And I am worried about the Bears offense going into this game. I know Justin Fields is supposed to be playing today. The Packers have a pretty abysmal run defense. So on paper, it sounds like this should be a good bounce back game for Justin Fields. But I don't know how willing the Bears offense is going to be getting Justin Fields running with that shoulder injury. They may want to send him back in the pocket, try and protect him a little bit, not make him make all those plays, put himself in harm's way, try and preserve him because they know they're not going over this year. So they just want to see him improve in some areas and get into next season healthy. So I don't know how big a factor Fields is going to have in the run game this week. And then you look at the Packers offense. The Bears defense is also pretty abysmal, especially against the run. I would expect Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon to have a good game this week. And then Christian Watson, I'm really happy to see this kid playing well. He had a really rough season this year, starting with the drops and then a lot of injuries. It seemed like every week it was a new injury for this kid. And in the last 3 weeks, 6 touchdowns in 3 weeks. That's pretty insane. And against 3 pretty good defenses. I mean, he did it against Philadelphia, Tennessee, and Dallas. I mean, those are 3 good defenses he's been putting up numbers against. I think Christian Watson has a chance to have another touchdown in this game the way he's been playing. I think the Packers get the run game going. I just don't know how willing the Bears are going to lean on their strength, which is the diverse run game that Fields presents. I think the Packers are going to walk away from Chicago with a pretty easy victory.
Yeah, with Justin Fields coming back, I think that's definitely a big thing to watch, and with Aaron Rodgers' injury as well. So I'm thinking this game, even with the tough defenses, this still might be a defensive battle, just with the lack of offensive production. So with that, I think I'm going to have the Bears covering the spread finally. Maybe not beat Aaron Rodgers, but give him a game so he can't just go off and brag about owning the Bears for the rest of the season. So Bears +4 for me, 4.5.
I still think he'll find a way to brag about it. But yeah, I'm going to take the Packers to cover this game because even if not, I think Jordan Love looked good enough that for whatever reason, if he has to play, he can. I look straight dumb because for basically 2 or 3 consecutive weeks, I kept saying Christian Watson is good. It's a breakout, but he's going to come back down to earth. Well, apparently not. Apparently he's just going to score a league record touchdowns in the second half of the year. So good for him. And I'm happy to see that he's playing better too. I agree with that because you don't want to see anybody struggle to start their career. Now, Packers are just a better team right now because, like you said, even though Justin Fields is back, if the Bears don't run him a lot, then they still have one of the worst offenses in the league. He opens up the run game, so even that is reliant on him as well. And I don't think there's any reason they should run him because the Bears finally have some good feelings. Finally, after all the final years of Matt Nagy and the beginning of the year here, they have a very high pick. They can go into next year feeling confident that they've got some players on defense, some good young players, Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon, Jalen Johnson. They've got their quarterback, and they need to continue to build around him. The only real way to completely mess that up is to go into the offseason with a major injury to Justin Fields. So, frankly, the only reason he should even play is just for like reps. There's no reason that he should be running, and they should probably tell him that it's okay to lose this game and that scrambling is probably not really what he wants to do. And if he does, get out of bounds or get down. Like don't be dumb. Don't try and be a hero against the Packers because season's basically lost at this point. So just play smart. But I'm going to take the Packers to cover the game, knowing that they have a little bit more going for them offensively. So next up, we have an NFC West matchup. We have quite a few divisional matchups this week. The Seattle Seahawks are going to Los Angeles. They are 6.5-point road favorites. The Rams, oh man, I mean, this should probably be a much larger spread, to be perfectly honest. No Matthew Stafford, no Cooper Kupp, no Aaron Donald. Like, why is this a less than a touchdown spread? Because I know that the Seahawks have come back down to earth a little bit, but they are at least winning games for the most part. I mean, they still have Kenneth Walker. They still have Geno Smith. They still have DK Metcalf. They still have guys who are moving the ball. They still have, I mean, they don't have a great pass rush, but they still have Tariq Woolen. They still have Kobe Bryant. They still have what's his name's their deep safety. So I mean, I am not seeing anything on this Seattle Seahawks injury report that would make me think that this should be less than a touchdown spread, personally speaking. You know, I just because it's home, I guess, but they don't even have a very good home advantage anyway. So like, I'm kind of tipping my hand, but you're going to have to really convince me if I'm going to pick anybody other than the Seahawks. What do you think there, Bryson?
No, I'm totally with you. I was a little shocked that this wasn't a bigger spread as well. I think the only reason it's not is because Seattle is on a 2-game losing streak and going into LA, going on the road. But still, even with that, I would still put this at the very least, I would have put this at 8 points. You know, I think that's how much better I think Seattle is right now. Like you mentioned, Seattle still does have a lot of their playmakers. They still, even in those losses, they still played pretty well in certain areas of the field. And they got outplayed. They had the massive touchdown running from Josh Jacobs to lose that game. And then some weird things in Germany against Tampa Bay. So that I think for the most part, they've still been playing really good football, even in their last 2 losses. I think the Rams are just such a mess right now. There's no reason to have any confidence in them going in this game. I get that Seattle's been on a slide. I still think that Seattle's a much, much better football team, especially with all the injuries in this game. Like you mentioned, maybe if Aaron Donald was in this game, maybe if Stafford was in this game, if they weren't so beat up, it's one thing. But not only are they missing Stafford and Donald, they no Cooper Kupp still, no Allen Robinson. It's a mess in LA right now. And I don't see any way Seattle doesn't win this game by at least a touchdown.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I don't see anything taking me away from picking Seattle today. Seattle has 2 questionable safeties, but I don't see the Rams being able to take advantage of backup safeties at all. So I'll just quickly go Seahawks -6.5.
Yeah. Again, I like I said, I pretty much tilted my hand there. But how can you pick against them? I mean, look, I understand in a similar way to the Giants, they outperformed expectations and they're falling back to earth a little bit. But the Seahawks are still overall more talented than the Giants. I mean, and we're talking about maybe the worst team in the NFL right now, because I don't know that if you put this injured Rams team up against the Texans, if they would actually win. Honestly, they're incredibly injured. They have been severely underperforming even when healthy. So I'm pretty shocked. I think the the Seahawks should win this by at least a touchdown. So, I mean, 6.5 points is 6.5 points. You never know, I guess. But just when you look at the overall state of these two teams, it is kind of surprising. All right. In a game that is much closer, the San Francisco 49ers are hosting the Miami Dolphins. Now, I am certainly hoping for a 49ers win here. A loss by the Dolphins, a win by the Jets would bump the Jets up over the Dolphins, at least for the time being, due to a tiebreaker. But this would probably be a relatively easy pick for me, depending on the spread in favor of the Dolphins. If Terran Armstead was healthy, because this is a monster matchup for the 49ers defensive line against a pretty banged up and overall unspectacular Dolphins offensive line. Terran Armstead had been the anchor. He had been protecting not the blind side, but the left side pretty comfortably for Tua, and that was one of the big parts of their success. So, even without him, their offense might be explosive enough to get it done. But, against one of the best defenses in the league, it definitely gives you pause. And I would imagine that is one of the primary reasons that the 49ers are 4.5-point favorites in this game. Because I do suspect that if Armstead was healthy, then it would either be close, if not a Dolphins favorite here. So I'm not going to tell you what my pick is just yet, but I will throw it to you, Bryson, to make yours.
Yeah, to your point with Terran Armstead, the Niners did open up as just 3.5-point favorites, and now they're 4.5-point favorites with the the trending news that Terran Armstead's probably not playing in this game. So I wonder if that's a little bit of line movement with the odds makers. Like, okay, he's finally out. He's at least worth a point for this Dolphins going into this game. And I think I'm going to take the Niners to win this game. The Niners offense hasn't given me a ton of confidence, even with all the stars they have on this team. It's been really interesting. They have Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and they scored 13 points last week. Now, they shut out the Saints, so that helped. They helped them get a pretty confident win. But that offense is still it's coasting by in a lot of games, which with those many stars, you should be putting up points like the Dolphins have been putting up this year. And this is a tough game to pick. I think this is going to be the best game of the week, maybe second best to the next one we're going to talk about. But this Dolphins offense is so explosive. They are playing at such a high level. But that Niners defense, you said one of the best defenses. I think that undersold it. I think the Niners are the best defense in football right now. They haven't given up a point in the second half in 4 straight weeks, which is insane to think about. So I think with that, I'm more confident in the Niners defense being able to carry this Niners offense to a win. 4.5 points is a lot for me not being confident in the Niners offense, but I do think they have enough to get it done.
Yep, I feel pretty much the same way. Losing Armstead is huge, like we've mentioned. And I'll take the 49ers covering the 4.5. Hopefully their defense can dominate the Dolphins and keep it nice and low for their offense.
Well, I mean, you look at the back end of the 49ers defense, and so it's not just the defensive line teeing off. You know what I mean? It's not just mismatches of Eric Armstead and Nick Bosa and all these guys. It's also Hufanga and Ward on the back end. And so, yes, overall, would it be a mismatch in favor of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle against those guys? Yeah, because they're playing well. I don't think that they are. I mean, Hufanga's playing great, but I don't think Charvarius Ward is, a lockdown corner. I think he's benefits greatly from the amount of pressure that they get, but they're also good enough. It's not just the defensive line and a bunch of Jags back there. It's good players. I think Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner are going to make their money this week, because if they don't have time to get the ball deep, then they're going to be needing to get the ball to their explosive playmakers underneath. And it's going to come down to those linebackers rallying and tackling very effectively to avoid chunk plays. So It's a very complete defense, and they're going to need every single part of it to lock down the Dolphins. Dolphins defense has not been that good, to be perfectly honest, but they've been good enough considering how many points the offense has put up. The offense is not putting up as many points. It's, going to be a real test for the defense to hold up on their end. So we'll see. I'm going to take the 49ers. I am kind of hesitant because 4.5 is a fair amount. I think the 49ers will win, but will it be closer than 4.5? I wouldn't be at all surprised about that. So I am going out on a limb with them to cover as favorites, but I do think, we just saw it last week. We saw last week that the Dolphins backup offensive linemen were making the Texans pass rush look like, league elite. So in this game, it's going to be worse. I trust Mike McDaniel to scheme some things up, but I think there's only so much that he can do under the circumstances. And even if Armstead doesn't play next week, I forget who they play, but they'll probably have enough offensive firepower to win until he gets back. But this is just such a good defense that it's a tough matchup the week after he goes out. So
they got the Chargers next week.
Yeah, and they don't have nearly as good of a pass rush. So it's probably going to be fine for the Dolphins. But I do think this is going to be a multi-week injury and that they're either hoping or they're just stringing it along just to keep defenses, guessing. But regardless, I do think the 49ers come out on top and cover this. All right. One of the best games of the week. So I think we have 3 premier games on Sunday. One is the Jets-Vikings, one is the 49ers-Dolphins, and the third would be the Bengals and Chiefs. So the Chiefs are visiting Cincinnati, but they are 2-point favorites in the game. Bengals are playing better down the stretch. This absolutely 100% could be our conference championship, just like it was last year. So this is a rematch of that game. It is a potential preview of this upcoming playoffs. And the Bengals just beat a team that they might have to face in the playoffs. This is another opportunity for them to do so. So, Bryson, what do you think? Does the Bengals offense without Jamar Chase, he's still out, right?
Nope, he's expected to play.
Oh, he's expected to play. All right. So does the Bengals offense with a Jamar Chase just getting back have enough firepower to beat the Chiefs? Can their defense hold up, which has been playing pretty well this year? Or does Patrick Mahomes do his thing and just no matter what happens, will always find a way to win at the end of the game? Because with a 2-point spread, that's basically what you're picking if you're picking the Chiefs.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Bengals in this game. I don't know what it is, but I think the Bengals I know they've only played against each other once, but I think Joe Burrow has momentum playing the Chiefs. I think he likes these kind of matchups. I think he likes being viewed as the underdog in these type of big games. And for what it's worth, last time Joe Burrow played against this Chiefs team, he lit them up. Jamar Chase specifically had a monster game. He had 266 receiving yards in that game and 3 touchdowns. I don't know if he has that big a game for his first game coming off the injury, but I've been really impressed with the Bengals' ability to still put up really good offensive numbers with Jamar Chase out, with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd leading the way. No Joe Mixon's going to be tough. He was, I think, finally starting to get it going and then got injured, but I think they've been winning games without Joe Mixon being stellar anyway, so I don't know how much of a factor he would have really played in this game. I think there's going to be a ton of passing. I don't think there's going to be a lot of running plays in this game. Neither team runs the ball extremely effectively. I think the one reason I'm going to take the Bengals is I think their defense has a chance to make plays when the Chiefs defense doesn't. I have more confidence in the Bengals defense than the Chiefs defense. I think all it takes for a game like this is 1 stop, maybe 2 stops is all you need for your team to come away with a victory in this kind of game. I think it's going to be high powered. I think it's going to be fun to watch, but I think Joe Burrow is going to find a way at home to get it done versus Mahomes and the Chiefs. So I'm going to take the Bengals to cover the spread. And at this point, it's such a close spread that I'm going to take them to win the game too.
Yep. I think I like the Bengals as well with the points being at home. And just I know that the NFL season is long and things change so much during it, but any team that has lost to the Colts this year, I really don't have much faith in them beating too many other teams. I like what you said about the Bengals defense having a chance to be opportunistic, which the Chiefs have had problems with. So with the 2 points being at home, I'll take the Bengals as well.
Yeah, I mean, you almost talked me into it, but I have a pretty firm rule, and it's take the quarterback I think is better in a game that I think is tight. And Joe Burrow is playing like a top quarterback, but Patrick Mahomes is still the best quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion. So I'm going to take him. If I lose on this pick, I will have no remorse because it's a pretty firm rule I stand by when it's this close. I mean, there's a difference between, picking a team to cover a spread when the Chiefs are like +9, right? But when it's +2 and there is no real reason to say that the Chiefs won't win this game, except that the Bengals are playing really well and have good quarterback play too. I will take the Chiefs. The Chiefs, I think, are one of those teams where they've had so much success for such a length of time, and they still just keep winning and winning and winning, that they kind of go to sleep against lesser teams, and they do end up winning, but we tend to look at them as not being as good. But I think Andy Reid prepares them more effectively against better competition. So even though the Bengals are a little hotter right now, I do think the Chiefs will have every opportunity to hang with them and win this game. And again, it will be a great game. I'm excited that this is a 325 game, which means that like I can watch all the mess of 1:00 games without, you know what I mean? And I can watch and enjoy that. And then once this comes on, I can really focus on 2 games, probably one on each screen, of 49ers, Dolphins, Bengals, Chiefs, and really just not worry about anything else. Like, am I really worried about missing Rams, Seahawks, or Raiders, Chargers? I can watch those later if I want to. This is the highlight of the weekend for sure.
Yep.
All right. So, final afternoon game, we have the Raiders as 2.5-point favorites for first time in how long over the Los Angeles Chargers. Raiders are hosting, favorites, coming off a big win versus Seattle. I don't think this makes any sense, to be perfectly honest. I know that they played better, but the Chargers, I think, are still an overall better football team than them. Even though it's in Raiders' house, I still think the Chargers should be favorites in this game. I think the Chargers have played tougher teams the past few weeks. I think they played the Chiefs, I think, last week, I believe. Or no.
They played
they played
Cardinals.
They played the Cardinals
and then the Chiefs
won.
Before that.
They played the Chiefs before that and the 49ers the week before that. They had the back-to-back primetime matchup. And they lost both of those games, but they're both very good. And they beat the Cardinals, who are a lesser team. I think the Raiders are also a lesser team right now. And even though they did beat the Seahawks, even if the Raiders win, I still think, like, ideologically the Chargers should be favorited. But I'll digress on that. Do you think the Chargers will win this game? Do you think they'll cover as underdogs, even if the Raiders win, and why?
That's interesting. You brought up the fact you think the Chargers should be favorites. They did open up as 2-point favorites. This has been the craziest line movement this week. I mentioned it earlier that there are some pretty wild ones with that Lions-Jaguars game earlier. The Chargers open up the week as 2-point favorites, and now they're 2.5-point underdogs. That's a massive swing. And I've been looking at the injury reports, all that kind of stuff. I didn't see any major names be activated or ruled out for this game that would have swung it in that direction. I think in large part the reason why the Raiders ended up being favorites, they are at home, which gives them automatically 3 points. And they've been winning football games, and the Chargers, they did come off a win against the Cardinals, but then after that, like you said, a couple losses in a row. I think they're more evenly matched right now than they were earlier in the year. I think the biggest reason I'm taking the Raiders to cover the spread. I think the biggest reason is the way Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams have been playing the last few weeks have been insane. Josh Jacobs especially has been absolutely balling the last couple weeks, and this Chargers defense, it's underperformed all year. They're a bad defense. They're 28th against the rush, and they're 18th against the pass. And with the way that Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs have been playing as of late, I think that gives me confidence in this Raiders offense finding ways to get it done. And then I'm not impressed by the Chargers personally. I don't think they're a very good football team in my opinion. I think they've coasted with some wins early in the year against lesser opponents like you mentioned. But I think in this matchup the Raiders are playing much better football. I think that they are coming into this game with a lot of momentum, looking to beat up on their division rivals, and I think Josh Jacobs specifically is going to carry them to a win. So I'm going to take the Raiders to cover here.
Yeah, I think Josh Jacobs could definitely carry this game on his back, but he is questionable with a calf injury. Obviously, I don't know the extent of that.
Mhm.
But that being said, I think the Chargers can find a little bit of positive ground here going into the Raiders being the underdogs and at least covering the 2.5 point spread. But I think if they're going to cover that spread, they're gonna win outright. So I'll take the Chargers with the points and hopefully the win.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Chargers here too because I think if you're going to give me points in favor of the Chargers, I'll take them. And frankly, as great as Josh Jacobs has performed, it's completely unsustainable. They gave him like 33 carries plus touches in the passing game. Like, no wonder he's questionable with an injury, you know? And in this game, it's like, how impactful will he be? Questionable at this point was a key player, probably means he's going to be in the game, I would guess. But still, you know what I mean? Like, any carry can knock him out of the game at this point. It's just it's such a physical position. You just can't ride a guy like that in the modern NFL. I mean, I'm trying to remember the last time even Derrick Henry had 33 carries. Probably he's had it a few times, but he's also kind of special. You know, Josh Jacobs has had more injury issues in his career. So, I mean, again, if he just goes off and has another 200 total yard performance, I mean, I guess I'll just take the L on that. But I think it's completely unsustainable even against a pretty underwhelming defense. And I will just rely on the quarterback who I think is better, generally speaking. And I do, even though maybe there are more weapons on the Raider side, I do believe that Justin Herbert is the better quarterback by a fair margin. So I'm going to take the Chargers plus 2.5 here. And that will take us into the final game of our pick'em today. The Dallas Cowboys hosting the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday Night Football. The Colts are 10.5 point underdogs, and I think I know why. And I believe that his name starts with M, and it finishes with Ika Parsons. And I don't know if that was just a terrible dad joke, but regardless, this is going to be brutal. I mean, they can put him wherever they want to. They can put him on the left side, and he's going to have to face whoever, I guess. I mean, who's on the left side now? Is it going to be Pryor still?
On the offensive left side?
Yeah.
It's still it's Reinman, the rookie.
It's still, okay.
Braden Smith is out this week on the right side.
Exactly.
So not sure who's going to, maybe Pryor there. I really have not heard who's going to take his starting spot.
And so either they're going to put him against a second round or a third round rookie who is, you know, been questionable at best, and or a backup right tackle who probably is the failed left tackle to start the season. So it doesn't matter where they put him. He is going to have a huge game, I think. I mean, this is the kind of game that, honestly, you know, because they will have to pass at some point. This could be the kind of game where Micah Parsons like takes the lead in sacks based on like a 3 or 4 sack performance just because of who he's matched up against. And, you know, it's the kind of thing where if they really wanted to, they can just go out there and say, hey, you know, we can adjust the defense when they like, this is straight up the kind of game where they can go out and say, hey, wherever they put the tight end, just switch to the weak side of the formation and just rush whatever tackle doesn't have chip help. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because at this point, their defense is notably better. Their offense is notably better. And as soon as the point differential gets a little bit too big and they can't just rely on Jonathan Taylor to run the ball, they are going to, have to pass it, and that's going to lead to a lot of opportunities. So I don't think the game will immediately start that way because they will try and ride the run game, but at some point they'll have to open up the pass game, and I think that it could get pretty bad. So as far as a 10.5-point spread, we can pick that here now, but I think, the outlook on this game is a little bit rough for the Colts because the lack of Braden Smith that's a problem, I think.
Mhm.
So I'll throw it to you here, Bryson, to make your official pick, but I've prefaced it without a lot of confidence in the Colts. Sorry, Noah.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a rough game for the Colts. I'm gonna take the Cowboys to cover the spread. There are a couple of things that don't give me like 100% confidence in this spread, though. One, Anthony Barr is out, and I'm not worried about him being out because of his play. What I'm worried about is sometimes Dan Quinn in matchups where teams run the football first. We saw this earlier in the year with the Packers when they don't have their starting middle linebackers. They throw Parsons in as a middle linebacker. They don't let him rush the passer. They play him more as a run stopping first middle linebacker, and he's playing in coverage more than he should. And I'm worried Dan Quinn against another matchup where they should come out of this game victorious with their middle linebackers injured. I'm a little worried Dan Quinn's going to do a pretty similar thing, where he's going to look at it and go, okay, I can have Micah Parsons look really dominant in other areas of this field, and he may not have as big a game as people think. Now, I would still put Parsons on the line, let him rush the passer, like you said, Max. But that's one area of concern. I'm worried Dan Quinn's going to try and get a little too cute with Micah Parsons in this game. And then one thing that gives the Cowboys troubles so far this season is the run game. So if Jonathan Taylor gets it going early, it could be a chance for the Colts to keep this game close. But at the end of the day, I'm going to take the Cowboys because I do think all it takes is one or a couple of big plays by the defense to put that offense in good positions to score. And then CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott are getting that connection going finally. They're looking really good together. I think CeeDee has a chance for another really solid game. I think overall just the Cowboys are that much a better team. There are just things that the Cowboys do every now and then that when you're looking at a spread like this, you're like, oh, the Cowboys should win this game pretty easily. They try things that they shouldn't, and things don't go well. If they just stick to what the Cowboys do well, they'll win this game pretty easily, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree. As a hopeful Colts fan, I have gone into every single game this season believing that we have a good chance to win, no matter what. And we've put up decent performances, except for week 2 against the Jaguars, which is what I'm afraid that this game is going to turn into. Another shutout loss for the Colts, which if we try to establish the run game early, we're going to have a little bit of trouble with that because we have been successfully running behind Braden Smith as of late. And without him on that side, I'm fairly certain that the push isn't going to be there. And so with no offensive production, there's a great chance for the 10.5-point spread. Take it over to the Colts defense. Kenny Moore, starting slot cornerback, out. Great in the run game and has been okay in coverage this year. Definitely struggling. But also backup cornerback Isaiah Rodgers. He's been floating in between cornerback 2 and cornerback 3. He is questionable as well, and he is also a huge part of our run game and another great coverage cornerback. So with those two guys out, questionable, and Braden Smith, then I think that this 10.5-point spread is well within reach of the Cowboys. So I will sadly take the Cowboys covering the spread.
Yeah, I think that this game could start, and be relatively close for maybe 2 quarters. Maybe as we creep into the third, it starts to open up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But once the Cowboys do really start to pin their ears back, it's going to be a tough day. And, I think that the Cowboys will cover. I think it'll probably be more than 10.5 points as we get to the fourth quarter. And then depending on if the Colts try and just maintain their style of play and just kind of emotionally accept the loss relatively early, maybe it won't become a huge point differential just because, you really kind of need turnovers usually to have a massive point spread. And if they just keep running the ball and punting, then, it'll probably go up slowly bit by bit. But if they do try and open it up and pass to get back in the game, I think then it could get pretty ugly. And at that point, we could be looking at like a 20-point type of victory. So I'll take the Cowboys to win and to cover. This will be a challenging game for Jeff Saturday as the interim head coach, because this is probably the biggest mismatch they've had, especially in prime time, with all eyes on him since he's been there. Because the Eagles were a tough game. They didn't really. That was kind of fresh early in his tenure. They had come off a win, that wasn't prime time. This is, all eyes are going to be on, and they're more banged up, and the Cowboys are hot, and so I'll take the Cowboys to win and cover. I hope that things go well for Jeff Saturday. I don't think he's going to be back as the coach next year or anything like that, but definitely hope that he doesn't have too many brutal questions to answer after in his post-game presser. So that's going to do it for the Pick'em session today. Let's take a look back at last week. I think I did pretty well. I'm feeling pretty good right now because I had a good week. Let's go to standings, and I also got my Thursday night pick right this week. So let's see, week 12. All right. So this week I got 10, which tied me with Tyler Achette for first place in just a week of picks. Let's see. Kyle had 7, and Bryson, you had 9.5. You had a good week too.
Mm-hmm.
So, not bad. And I'll shout out Jared Pfeiffer too. He also had 9.5. So nice. All right. So that's it. And then in terms of the entire season overall, I am in second place behind Kyle by 4 points now because I gained 3 points on him this week. So, and he's not here obviously this week, but I'm sure he's made all his picks, and so we'll see how that goes next week. All right, gentlemen, I believe that'll do it for us. I should actually say, Bryson, you are at 83.5, so you're not far behind either. So you're 4.5 points behind.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Tight race, fellas. Tight race as we come into the final stretch of the 2022 NFL season. So everything is coming to fruition. The draft order, the playoff picture, and our pick'em race.
Yes, sir.
Bryson, let everybody know where they can find you. And we will see you again, of course, next week for our Week 14 pick'em on Sunday morning.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at BrysonOwen16. That's BRISON. And you can see me on here at Gridiron Heroics and on DenverSportsBetting.com.
Beautiful. And Noah, you are our producer. So you are on every single show in the background. Sometimes you get to take a front-facing role for us, just like today. So appreciate you, but let everybody know where they can find you.
Yep. If you guys want to find some Colts articles, maybe not at the end of the season here. Maybe we're gonna do some forward thinking articles, a little positive stuff. But you can find me on GridironHeroics.com. I've been trying to come out with articles twice a week, but this holiday break and the Colts downfall has been a little rough for me. But I'll be back to it soon.
All right. Beautiful. All right. So we'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern to recap this weekend with Kyron Samuels, and we might have Nick Miriam on with us as well to do a recap. And of course, Max Chadwick from PFF will be on to do our college football update, which is basically championship weekend. So lots to talk about there. I know Kyron is going to be talking plenty of trash about TCU. I'm sure he's got that locked and loaded. He's probably already doing it on Twitter as we speak. So, fellas, thanks again. Let's go off line so I can do some work and then watch an excellent weekend of football.
Yep.
This podcast is brought to you by Gridiron Heroics Media.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.